And I would like to introduce, first of all, Peter Alcaraz, who's author of a book called The Wealth Game. And he's also the author of a related popular series of articles on Interactive Investor, which are all about how to achieve financial freedom more quickly. And I do recommend that you go and read them afterwards because they're fascinating. I'm going to just let Peter spend a few minutes explaining his top pieces of advice for achieving financial independence and for spotting wealth opportunities. So here he is.
So 10 years ago this year, I resigned from my job and stopped full-time paid work completely. It was a happy day. My wife came up and met me at the Statue of Eros in Piccadilly. We booked a table in a restaurant in Carnaby Street. We sat down and celebrated and reflected on this achievement. It was the end of a plan that I put in place when we got married in 1998. And I said to her, in 10 years' time, I'm out, I'm going to be finished, whatever state we're in, we'll survive. Now, in actual fact, I've been working for 10 years before that to put in place the building blocks to be able to retire early. So, the book, I then wrote a book, which came out in 2016. It was everything I wished I'd known when I was 20. It is a gold mine, it is full of really good information, and it works. So, I started young. The system works best if you start when you're young, if you start in your 20s. It works for anyone, though, at any point. So what I would say is I've worked with people since writing it who are in their 50s and 60s, and they can make life-changing improvements to their situation over a 5 to 10 year period by putting this system in place. For those with children, it's an obvious one to get them reading it. Okay, so the first point I wanted to make was just start early. Start early if you can. Ideally, you'd have 10 years of hard work and wealth building before family costs set in. If you can do that, great. If not, you just have to do the best you can. Okay, so the first thing is set a goal. It's very obvious. My goal I call O, which was the objective from the whole exercise. And it was, I can live the life I want without needing to work for money again. Okay, I can live the life I want without needing to work for money again. Doesn't mean I won't work for money again. It just means I don't need to if I don't want to. That begs the question, what life did I want to lead? And this is a question a lot of people don't ask. I know people who've come toward retirement and have actually kind of slightly fallen apart because they don't know what to do with themselves. They suffer a bit of agoraphobia. So asking the question early and then continually asking that question, it's a really worthwhile thing to do. In the process, you examine the prize. This is a big prize, being able to live the way you want without having to work for money again. So you examine it, and it's not like daydreaming, like winning the lottery or something like that. It's actually, the science behind it is called mental contrasting. And you focus on a goal that is achievable and realistic. You really believe in that goal. You hold it up and you kind of polish it. But you know it's not going to be easy to get there. So in the course of that mental contrasting, you start thinking about some of the things that might get in the way. You don't get caught up on them. You're just aware of them. And naturally, something happens in the mind. So as you progress on your journey, when you hit these issues, family issues, problems at work, not getting as much income as you wanted, or costs running out of control, you can deal with them. So you've adopted your strategy, you've uploaded it into your system, you know what you're heading for. Now, it's an obvious thing, but a lot of people don't really do that. They don't believe that it's possible. The next thing is you need a strategy for getting there. It's a twofold strategy. The first one we've been talking about today, and it's what this conference is about. It's about building your wealth, building your net worth. And in the book I talk about it, it's quite simple, but there's a lot to it. You maximize your surplus cash. There's a lot there. You apply it to a range of appreciators. I call assets that inexorably grow in value, I call them appreciators. Apply as much cash to those as you can. You use debt, leverage, if you can as well. It's rocket fuel to building your wealth. Obviously, at a later stage, you don't use leverage, but when you're building your wealth, you use leverage. And then you allow compounding to do its thing. And the combination of those things will build wealth. It just simply happens. The other side, which people don't focus on anywhere near as much, is your needs. If you're wealthy, if you have more than you need. If you don't have more than you need, you're not wealthy. So the needs side of the picture is an area which I really explore in the book, and it's fascinating. What do? You become an architect. You design a life that you want. You sit back and think, what sort of life do I want? How much is it going to cost? And you make some choices and decisions about that. And you kind of price them a little bit. Now, at 20, it's going to be a very different life as it is at 30 or 40, and you keep changing those. You keep upgrading the list. My list was very long to start with. Included a long shopping list of things I wanted, lots of things. Car, boat, big house, holiday, you want everything. Later on, when I've, 10 years ago, stopped working, my list is very short now. It's very, very short indeed. My only luxury is children and holidays and travel. That's it, really. So, the needs, if people don't grip their needs, they run out of control. It's the classic thing. Someone has a pay rise, they go and spend it. I have lots of my contemporaries. Most of my contemporaries are still working. And that's why, because their needs, their lifestyle has just got totally out of control. Finally, then, you need to measure your net worth and your needs. It's all very well embarking on this exercise, but you need a way of measuring it because it's got to be realistic. So how you measure your net worth every year. I think people don't do this enough. I worked in banking, and it's amazing how few people look at their net worth every year or can tell you what it is without having to go and calculate it. So calculate your net worth and then look into it. What is in the net worth? I look at the different classes of assets. I categorize them as appreciators, assets which are going up, depreciators, assets which are going down. So that's cars, caravans, boats, paraphernalia of that sort. And then consumables, which are just, well, they don't count at all. This is your clothes, your electronic gadgets, etc. So I look at my net worth, say how much is in each of these buckets. I want as much as I can in appreciators. And appreciators are shares, cash, shares and property, typically. So I measure my net worth, and I do it every year. I don't get hung up on it. Measuring needs is more interesting, and this is a new thing, which I hadn't seen before. But it works, it's a rule of thumb, and I do it every year, okay? So what I do, because net worth is today's value of your current assets less liabilities, you need to do the same for needs, you need to compare it. So take each category of needs, so accommodation, subsistence living, children, cars, holidays, luxuries, end-of-life care, and I calculate, it doesn't take long, you could all do it, what the total sum of those things are in today's money. Okay, so say cars, if I'm 40 and I run it through until I'm 90, so I've got 50 years to calculate. Say I'm going to change my car 5 times, I'm going to spend in today's money 20,000 on a car each time, that's 100,000 to go in. If my subsistence living costs are 20,000 a year, over 50 years, that's £1 million. Okay, so I build up a picture in that way. It changes, obviously, but you can do it. And then I compare the two. So net worth divided by my needs. If my net worth, for a 40-year-old, you can get to a £3 million net needs total very easily without really trying too hard. So, £3 million needs total, £1 million of net worth today. Your NAN ratio, the net assets to needs ratio, is 0.33 times. You've got a way to go. When you get to 1 times multiple, your net worth and your needs matching up, you know you're in the zone. And I think if you can get to 1.3 or 1.4, then you're covered home then. So this is a way of simply, it's like a game to start with. You go away, you calculate your net worth, you should all do it. You look at your needs. What it does is it encourages you to focus on each area of your needs. You see that there's a rather big gap here. I've got a lot to do. How am I going to bridge this gap? And it becomes an exercise in a whole. I like it because it's top-down. It's not a bottom-up exercise. It's top-down. You focus on 2 big things: net worth, needs. Yes, you need to look at cash, but this isn't about auditing your life and doing a granular weekly budgeting and cash flow forecasting exercise, which is just dispiriting, and people lose perspective of why they're doing it. What I've found is that by having a goal, a clear goal, having a strategy, and then doing this kind of calculation, wealth-promoting behaviors just naturally follow. I ride motorbikes, and as you go round the long corner, if you look at the point across to the far side of the corner, that's all you do. You just get there. It just happens. I don't know how, but it just happens. It's a known phenomenon. So I think trying to build too many rules and regulations and this and that into getting to somewhere, it is just not going to work. Whereas if you've got this big goal, then that will. Okay, so Moira said, could I give you some wealth opportunities? I'll give you a few. There's quite a lot in the book, but basically, it's very hard to become an expert in assets. I worked in banking for a long time, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert. So the first thing is pick some experts. Find some really good experts. There are 2 categories I think are really useful to you. One is tax advisors. I use a tax advisor regularly every year. Sometimes I go and I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but I come out after an hour's meeting and we've covered all manner of things. He just tells me what all the reliefs are, what the changes are, applies it to our situation. It's really useful. You probably do it already, but if you don't, a tax advisor. The second expert I would ask you to delegate to is your fund manager and funds. These are people I will happily pay money to, because they live or die by their performance of their funds. They have teams of analysts, etc. So funds I like. Second point, I stick to funds. I don't buy individual company shares. I have a chunk of Close Brothers, which I built up, which is where I used to work. I understand how Close Brothers shares perform, so that's different. But unless you know a company really well, and even Patisserie Valerie fell over recently, and the chairman, who's a seasoned campaigner, seems to have not realized what was going on. Okay. Next, take charge of your investments, which we've kind of talked about here. Every year, don't leave it to experts. Take charge of the investments. Every year I sit down, look at my portfolio, what geography, what size, income or growth, what baskets am I interested in, then I bring out the best funds in those categories. I look at them and I make the reshuffling accordingly. Use your pension ISA, obviously, it's easily said. I didn't know, well, I have been for years now, but you can pay £2,880 for each of your non-earning children and non-earning spouse a year into their SIPs. The government gives you £720. It's things like every year, that over and over, and this is kind of things you need to know. And finally, I would say, play the private equity game if you're building wealth. This is what I did. You take your income, use it as the source of cash flow to service debt, interest, and repayments. You borrow and you buy residential property. You then slowly pay off that debt, but you direct the money, your residual income, into stocks and shares, Once you've paid off the debt a little bit, then you refinance again. It's what private equity does, and you can do it. The trick is to have a fairly steady income and a reliable income, which can come from your earnings, your job, or your investments. That's it, I think. So thank you very much.